You remain under oath, Mr. Reeves. Continue your direction.
Yes, I was asking you about whether or not you had done some analysis on the Birdsong Road, the Birdsong Road Tower. And by that, I am referring to the tower, that number 39077, which is the one that's in the upper quadrant by the Tennessee River.
The sector here.
Yes. And did you pull records from the calls of these men for that sector, that Birdsong 7 sector?
Yes, I did. I pulled the records for the month of April 2011
Okay.
for Shane Austin, Jason Autry, Zach Adams, and Dylan Adams.
Okay. And what did your record show? I know we have quite a few phone calls here, but
The briefest synopsis I can give is that they, all four of them, to varying degrees, used that sector throughout the month repeatedly on various days, various times, quite a few times.
okay. And do you have a spreadsheet that reflects that?
I do.
Okay, and on the top of that spreadsheet, will you just write the Birdsong Sector 7 at the top of that spreadsheet?
Okay?
Okay, and Your Honor, we'd like to have this marked as the next exhibit.
Be 241.
Okay, and let me hand it back to you. In general then, can you just give the jury a general idea of what days, and these records are color-coded. Is that right? They're color-coded?
That's correct.
So, okay. Okay, so without going into too much detail, when does it look like these records are color-coded? Each person has their own color, is that right?
That's correct, although I will say, looking at this, it doesn't appear that the color difference between Jason Autry and Dylan Adams is all that clear on this particular printing.
Okay,
If you look at the second page, you'll see Dylan Adams also is a background of orange. It's just that his text is black instead of white.
okay.
So yes, the attempt was to color code it, but I think that there was a little bit of discrepancy on how the colors turned out in the printing.
Okay, so just quickly, can you just kind of quickly give us a rundown of when it looks like people are there?
Sure. Shane Austin used that sector on April 2nd. Jason Autry, sorry, at 11:45 a.m. Jason Autry used that sector on April 6th from 12:13 p.m. all the way through 8:13 p.m. Zach Adams used that sector from...
Okay, wait a minute, that's April 6th, and then there's another one there.
I'm sorry, you're correct. Sorry, April 6th from 12:13 p.m. to 1:56 p.m. And then April 9th from 5:03 p.m. to 8:13 p.m.
Okay,
Zach Adams used the sector from April 10th at 7:10 p.m. to 8 p.m. Dylan Adams used that sector on April 11th from 12:06 a.m. to 12:51 a.m. Zach Adams also used that sector later in the day of April 11th from 8:28 9:28 a.m. to 9:55 a.m. On the 11th, then also Jason Autry, and this is the,
Is this the same day?
that's correct. Same day, different time, Jason Autry at 10:13 a.m. And also Zach Adams at 10:13 a.m. Jason Autry again at 10:33 a.m. and 10:34 a.m. Zach Adams at 11:11 a.m. And this is still April 11th. Jason Autry at 12:04 p.m. and 12:05 p.m. on April 11th. All the way from, and then again, 12:50 p.m. to 4:53 p.m. on the 11th. Then on the 13th,
But we've reviewed the 13th, so we can
yeah,
skip that.
correct.
How about on the 14th?
So on the 14th, Jason Autry has activity on that sector at 6:44 p.m. and 6:46 p.m. Zach Adams likewise has activity at 6:54 p.m.
Same day as
Sa-
Jason?
Same day, yes.
And close in time.
So
to
9
Jason.
minutes apart. So, and I'm going to kind of summarize this because there's quite a few on the 14th. On the 14th, both Jason Autry and Zach Adams have activity on that sector all the way from, starting at the previous page, 6:44 p.m. all the way up to 10:59 p.m. on the 14th. On the 15th, Jason Autry used that sector from 1:26 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Again on the 16th, Jason Autry used that sector from 5:43 p.m. or just at 5:43 p.m. for 3 different activities. On the 22nd, Jason Autry and Zach Adams used that sector in close proximity or close time, 1:58 for Jason Autry, 2:02 for Zach Adams, and then again for Jason Autry. On the 27th, Jason Autry used that sector from 2:53 p.m. And the last record for Jason Autry was 6:35 p.m., but there are also records for Zach Adams around that same time frame from 5:49 p.m. to 6:41 p.m. on April 27th.
Okay. No, I just like to put that. Now, we've heard you talk about the fact that you used telephone records with locations in order to decide where the phones were located. I'd like to pass some records up to you and see if you recognize these records. First set, I'm going to pass up to you. And do you recognize what those records are?
Yes, these are the call detail records for Zach Adams from AT&T.
Okay, will you write on the top, call detail Zach Adams? And then what's the second set I passed you?
Right, so the first set was the call detail for voice records, The second set is the call detail for SMS or text message.
Okay, will you
Right.
write that call detail for text message on the second one? I guess go back on the first one and write voice. Second one, call detail for Zach Adams text.
So the first one is labeled voice call details, Zach Adams. Second is text call details, Zach Adams.
Okay. I'd like to have these marked as the next two exhibits.
The 42 and 43.
And I believe, in Mr. Frizzell's report, he actually has a little section in there about how to read these records. Do you remember that?
That's correct.
I'm going to pass you the second set, and if you would just tell the jury if you recognize what they are, and then write on the top of the record what it is.
So the first one is the voice call details for Jason Autry. And then the second one is the text call details for Jason Autry.
Okay. Okay, and I'd like to have these marked as the next two exhibits, Your Honor.
44 and 45.
And then I'm going to pass you two more. Another set of records. If you recognize those, if you tell the jury what they are, and then write on the top of them.
The first page is the voice call detail records for Shane Austin. And the second page is the text call detail records for Shane Austin.
And I'd like to have these marks.
The 246 and 247.
So, Mr. Reeves, in your expert opinion, what is your conclusion regarding Zach Adams and Holly Bobo's devices and whether or not they were together on the morning of April the 13th?
In very general terms, the devices were not together at the same location at the same time during that morning. There was certainly one occasion that appears as Zach Adams' device was located in his home sector. The Holly Bobo device transitioned into that same sector at 9:10 a.m. So there are records that shows that Holly Bobo's device did travel into that area where Zach Adams' device was, but there were certainly cases prior to that where the devices were not together, clearly not together based on the call records.
And you're saying her device was traveling towards him at one point and then moved on?
Correct. Her device made a general clockwise loop from her home location up north, then to the east, into his home sector, southeast sector of Cox Road, and then back down south again towards Parson.
And in your expert opinion, what is your conclusion regarding the devices of Jason Autry and Holly Bobo on the morning of April the 13th?
There was no correlation that I could determine from the call records between Jason Autry's device and Holly Bobo's device.
Okay. No further questions.
Cross.
We could assume you're a power plant. Do you have some control over that?
Well, it's got to be plugged in.
It's your computer, right?
Yeah.
It's not plugged in.
Would you like me to plug it in, or?
You can step down. Might be the quickest way.
I think you'd probably be better at it than me. I don't really think I'm going to keep you that long. Okay?
Thank you.
Can you advance it to slide 7?
I
All right.
believe that's slide 7.
Before we get to the questions I'm going to ask you, before we get to the questions I'm going to ask you, let's just take one of these towers. I'm not even asking which one it is, just take this one, okay? Our diagram here has these 3 pie things, like you said, like a pizza, right?
Correct.
And this, I assume this is an attempt to provide some sort of understanding to everybody about how these towers work and how they're separated.
Correct.
Okay. Doesn't
To-
correspond.
To be clear, though, it's more, in the previous maps you've seen it just divided up into 120 degree, just 3 individual lines around the tower. The information shown here is more indicative of the actual antennas themselves and the characteristics of the antennas on the tower.
Of the antennas on the tower versus the area that it covers.
Correct.
Okay, because I understand what you're saying, and I'm not sure this is not any sort of type of trick. If I'm looking at this as a layperson for the first time, well, I mean, this man right here has no cell phone coverage. That's not right, right?
That's correct.
And-
What it does mean is to get technical on it, the areas that are shown, the lines that are shown up there are the areas of the maximum power on those antennas.
Exactly.
So it's not that there isn't power between those 2 antennas or in that gap area, if you will, where you're pointing here. So there's still power that comes out from this sector over here. It's just that there's not as much of it as there would be in the main beam of that antenna.
Exactly. I still got my cell phone service if I'm in this little gap-looking area.
For the most
Correct.
part, correct, yes.
I mean, we hope I do. Right.
If you can hear me now, yes.
If I can hear you now. And in reality, the coverage isn't a pie piece slice. Is that right?
From the individual cell sites?
Well, this is what I'm asking. These are straight lines out here, and then there's a border right here. So it looks like, if I was unfamiliar with stuff, that if I'm, I've got the laser pointer. If I'm standing, can you see? If I'm standing out here outside of my boundaries here, that I may not have any service from that tower, but that's not true.
Correct. Those pie slices that are shown are not trying to be indicative of coverage.
Absolutely. And that's all I'm trying to,
Yes.
This isn't a trick. This is to help us represent things, but in reality, my actual coverage areas are going to extend here, they're going to extend outside here. Isn't that true?
Further away from the towers, correct.
And even beyond that, if let's say, look at this here, if you shaded this like light blue, let's say, whatever color that is, okay? You see that?
Yes,
And you shaded this one dark blue.
yes.
But if I looked at like, and I think there's one in evidence, like, and I'm going to call it the wrong word, that overlay map or that propagation map, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, we discussed the predicted best server map.
Absolutely. What I would actually see is I'd see dark blue stuff up here. I'd see light blue stuff dispersed in. There's overlap.
Actually, no.
You talking about this tower?
Well, I'm talking about between the sectors of the tower.
Okay.
And I'm glad you asked that because I want to make sure that this is clear. I know when Agent Frizzell got up here, he did his example of, let's assume or pretend like these these chandeliers are individual cell sites. And he made the analogy that, when he was standing here, he could get service from that chandelier or that chandelier or that chandelier. And that's all completely accurate. But when we're talking about the sectors now, in each case for those sectors, the signal is going to be coming from that same location at the tower. And the antenna that's pointing towards you will always have stronger signal than the antenna pointing away from you, just by the nature of the physics of it. So when you start walking your way, let's say you walked around that, and so if you went like this, you would, by necessity, as you went into each sector, you would always be onto the sector that you are in the main beam of.
Okay.
Now the exception would be is as you traveled out of this sector around into the next one, you would have some area in here where you would be still on this one, but this sector would be getting stronger. And there was actually a reference made by Agent Frizzell to side lobes or back lobes, and indicating that it's possible to get on a sector that's pointing away from you. The reality is in this scenario, that would, I'd say never. I'm going to say 99.999% of the time, engineering term, never happen. The reason for that is that all of this signal, the vast majority of the signal is coming out here, and any signal from this antenna that would be in the back lobe would be so weak that the signal in the main lobes of the other antennas would be much, much stronger.
Okay, so with regard to, I think I got you. With regard to, if we look at the light blue area, if I'm in this light blue area, and of course it may extend out, but if I'm in this light blue area, then that's the sector I'm going to be in.
As opposed to the other sector of that same site, absolutely.
But if I'm in one of these, I'm going to use the wrong word, overlap or transition, whatever you want to say. If I'm in one of these areas, then not so much.
There would be some potential to be between those two sectors, one or the other.
Creating possibilities and probabilities about where I am.
Correct.
All right. I'm looking behind you, and it's Bobo residence. You made a comment while you were testifying that the question was asked of Agent Frizzell about the time of the abduction. And generally, you made that comment, correct? Let's say the abduction, for purposes of our testimony here, takes place at 7:45 a.m. at the Bobo residence. Okay.
Okay.
And these are her, like, some of her towers that you're showing on the left and the right of the Bobo residence.
Correct.
And actually, I think there's another one probably down here. Her phone,
There's a couple more further south that her phone is.
even though she has her house at her house that whole morning, it utilized different towers.
Correct.
And that's not uncommon, you said, in rural areas.
Well, specifically in areas where you don't, it's very rugged and mountainous. So there's certainly the possibility that, and let's go back to Agent Frizzell's example again, using these individual chandeliers as cell sites. As I sit here, I can see every chandelier. Frankly, they all look about the same brightness to me. But as I look underneath the desk here, where the light's being blocked, I get shadowing. So there's no light from these chandeliers making it down here. Whereas if this chandelier was on, this chandelier would have a better view down to this area.
Yeah.
So ultimately, what happens in these areas where they're kind of between all these cell sites, they're not right in the main beams and they're not right in the main coverage of it, is you can have that scenario pick up where you end up on some sites that may be further away but have a better view to that particular location.
Various variables could interplay, and I may go to that one versus that one or whatever.
Correct.
That's still my phone's still at my house.
Correct.
her phone's still at her house until 7:45 when she is abducted. 7:45, can you tell me where Shane Austin's phone is?
I cannot render any opinion on that based on his call records or the data available.
You can't at all, can you?
I cannot.
Because we don't see any activity on Shane Austin's phone at all until 9:23.
That sounds correct, but I will verify that. That's correct.
7:45, we don't know where Shane Austin's phone is.
Would you prefer that I go to the slide that has Shane Austin's records on it?
Let's just set this one.
Okay.
Shane Austin's phone, 7:45. We have no idea where it is, correct?
Correct.
Could even be turned off, correct?
Correct. I would have no way of knowing that based on these records.
7:45. Can you tell me where Dylan Adams' phone is?
No, I cannot. For the same reasons. There's no.
Here.
Could even be turned off.
Raise your voice a little bit. They're having problems picking you up all the way to the back. I'm having a
My
little
apologies.
problem. You're facing away from me, but
Could even be turned off, right?
That's certainly a possibility, yes.
Shane Austin and Dylan Adams' phones could both be turned off in their pockets as they're right outside the Bobo residence at 7:45, abducting Holly Bobo. Correct?
That is certainly,
This is kind of speculation.
no, he's asking, he's stating the phone could be, it's his area of expertise, he can express
That-
opinion on it.
that's correct.
Then we see her phone, if I understand, I think I'm traveling north,
Correct.
generally. And that's what the blue here indicates, correct?
That's the sector that she used.
That's the sector she used. Can you tell me when she uses this sector where Shane Austin's phone is?
No, I can't. She uses those sectors at 8:17 a.m. and 8:26 a.m. Sorry, her device uses those sectors at 8:17 a.m. and 8:26 a.m.
Can you tell me where Dylan?
And Shane Austin doesn't have any records, as we discussed, until 9:23.
Can you tell me where Dylan Adams' phone is when she hits this northern tower?
No, there were no records for Dylan's phone during that time.
So Shane Austin's phone could be in his front pocket. Dylan Adams' phone could be in his front pocket. They could have Holly Bobo in the truck at the time of this north tower ping or whatever it is.
I have no information on their devices during that time.
So they could be.
Yes.
Then her phone, and I'm going to get the word wrong, but transitions to this other side of the Shiloh Tower, correct?
Correct.
And as we said before, this is here. This is the overlap or whatever we want to say about the area between the two sectors here on the Shiloh Tower, correct?
Correct. There's a transition between the two.
Okay. So the first here and the second here. And this is, again, these lines should be going on further, right?
Yes, I would refer you to that predicted best server map.
Absolutely. You're familiar with what this area is here?
It's pretty rural, but
It's rural, absolutely. It's called Yellow Springs. Did you go to the area?
I've been through the areas.
Were you aware that Mr. Austin's house was in Yellow Springs?
Yes.
Were you aware that Mr. Austin's grandmother's house is right around the corner in Yellow Springs?
I had heard that, yes.
Were you aware that they're both in a very rural area?
Yes.
Now, you've testified about Mr. Adams's phone. And I believe the first activity we see on it is around 8:19. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It actually had activity earlier that day, like at 4:50 or something in the AM.
Very early, yes.
Right. But between 4:50 and the AM until 8:19, it doesn't have activity on it.
That's correct.
And can you tell me between those two times, okay, do you know where his phone is?
No, I do not.
Could be off,
Could be off.
could be on with no activity.
Correct.
And basically, could be anywhere as long as that gives him enough time to get back to this general area at 8:19.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
And in fact, during the time period, okay, during the time period that we have these pings and this activity of Holly's phone in the Yellow Springs area, we do see Mr. Adams' phone transition to this sector here, correct?
Correct.
And that's the sector that includes Mr. Austin's residence, correct?
Correct.
And that's the sector that includes Mr. Austin's grandmother's residence.
Correct.
And then we also see on Mr. Adams's phone during the same general time period, I believe, a time gap of around 20 minutes of inactivity. Is that correct?
You're making me do math in my head, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I believe it's closer to 15 if I'm doing the math right.
8:38 to 8:53.
Correct.
Okay, and that's you did math better than me. 8:58, I'm sorry, 8:38 to 8:53. And in those 15 minutes, his phone could be on or off, and it could also be anywhere on here, correct?
Well, obviously within the travel time.
So I could get back to,
Correct.
right. And we're talking about getting back to, we're talking about the difference between this sector right here, which again, there's transition and everything, and these lines should keep on forward, and this sector right here, which there's transition and everything, and these lines should keep on going forward.
Correct.
And then we even see after that, her phone, Holly's, transition into his home, with what we're going to call his home sector.
Correct.
Is that right? But, and I'm fine calling it his home sector, but actually, if we look at it, he's in this other sort of area, that whatever we want to call it.
Well, and one of the reasons I do call it his home sector is because historically, looking at the data, when we have every reason to believe him being there, like at 4 a.m., that is the sector that is utilized.
Yes.
So it's based on historical evidence as well as what we're analyzing here.
If we look at it on the diagram, it is in whatever we want to call this area between the two sectors.
Correct.
And then after her phone travels through that home sector, we see her phone again, right?
Correct.
Her last ping.
Her last locate, yes.
And that's going to be, I don't think, is this it?
Yes.
Okay. We see it way down south. Is that correct?
Well, we see it served off that cell, correct?
Sort of off that
Yeah,
southern.
that Parsons northwest sector.
Exactly. And at that time of that ping down south, after it's traveled north, after it's gone through Yellow Springs, after the time gaps and everything we talked about, when we see it for the last time down south, where's Dylan Adams' phone?
We don't have any call records for that time frame.
We don't know.
No.
Could be in his front pocket, and her phone could be in his truck.
We have no way of knowing.
At the same time, if I understand it right, Jason Autry's phone and Zach's phone go off to this Birdsong Tower, right?
Correct. In the general time frame, correct.
The general, and each of them, I think you said before, the phones may even be with each other based on some of your observations or whatever.
It's possible, yes.
Okay. So off to the river together, or to the area of the river, the Birdsong Tower
Correct.
area together, and then back together.
Correct.
And you were asked before about, there was another little map that had like a light green line. It wasn't part of your PowerPoint, I don't believe, but you were asked about sort of a timing issue about when one of Zach's calls was and what tower it was on, or what sector of the tower it was on.
Specifically related to birdsong and the return trip.
Exactly.
Yes.
The return trip. So you're asked a question about Zach's return trip.
Correct.
And you pointed out, if I understood it, that he was on a certain sector of that tower at a certain time.
Correct.
And then 6 or 7 minutes later, 7 or 8 or 6 or 7.
If you're going to ask me the times, I'm going to have to look at the map.
I think it's 32 to 38, but I don't know if that's 6 or 7 because of the way things are counting.
I believe that's the one that you're referring to.
$32, $38. Is that right?
Well, no, so the information that you're seeing here, this is that northeast sector. Everything in purple is that northeast sector of birdsong.
Yes.
Everything in brown is that west sector of birdsong.
Yes.
And this is the sector that I think you're referring to that was missing. So there was no, if the route back was down south and then west, we would have expected, if there was activity during that time, we would have expected to see activity on that south sector, 39078.
This is the tower, right?
That's the tower location, yes.
This is the river.
Well, that's the interstate, that's the river.
Yes, the river is the
Yes,
blue.
north-south.
Is the blue, right?
Correct.
And this is the tower. It's the purple one, right?
That's the sector, that's the purple one.
Sector one, the purple. So he starts out in that sector at 2:32, correct?
His last record in that sector is 10:32 a.m.
It's 10:32 a.m. And that sector includes an area south of that tower, correct?
Yes.
It's not the southern sector, if you want to say that.
Well, no,
it
I mean,
includes an
it's-
area south of
It's
that
exactly
sector.
what we've discussed before.
Exactly.
It's that there is a transition as you go between those sectors.
And then he transitions to this sector. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And at the time, this is the only, I just don't want it to be confusing, okay? You're not testifying that at 10:32 a.m., okay, that Zach Adams is standing as far as he can over here next to the river bridge before he starts his trip back.
No.
He could be anywhere as far as that goes.
Anywhere that's being served by that sector. Correct.
Including any sort of
The
overlap.
interesting thing here, though, is if you look at it, it is 10:32, he's on that sector. Within 3 minutes, he's on this west sector. And having been through this area, that's not a quick drive through that. So
Yeah, but-
to me personally, 3 minutes does seem odd. If there was activity for all the rest of that, those 3 minutes, I don't necessarily
But do you know,
jump to the conclusion that it would be enough time to pass through that sector.
do you know when it is a quick drive? When you're driving really quick. And so he goes through this western sector
Correct?
on the way back to the home sector,
Correct.
and actually on the way back to the yellow sector.
Correct.
You know where the Yellow Springs Church is?
Right up the road from Shane Austin's residence.
In that yellow sector.
Correct.
That's it.
Good to be back.
First thing I want to do.
authenticated that exhibit.
This exhibit, okay. I would like to, at this time, authenticate this exhibit. You recognize that as something that you've used in this case, is that right?
That's correct.
And then the other one, read the other one. Your Honor, I'd like, and that's an AT&T overlay coverage map. You've seen those before.
That's correct.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to
Be moved into evidence.
into evidence.
What did we say, 217? 219?
And you recognize this map also. That's a map of coverage as you drive around different roads and which tower is actually being used on. So it's also an overlay map, but it's just specific as to roadways.
This is actually, there's a significant difference between this map and that map. Not just because it's the roads that are drawn out, but this map is actual collected data from a device that drove these roads and showed what cell sites served through these areas, whereas that map is produced based on predicted physics modeling and calculations.
Okay.
So this is what I would call real-world data. This is what was actually in place when they drove it, whereas
Okay.
that other map is a prediction that tries to model real-world data.
Okay. And so, Your Honor, I'd like to move this second item, and it is 218 into evidence at this time.
Moved into evidence. 218.
So we'll look at this map 219, right here. And would you agree with me that this area right here is the Shiloh Road Tower?
Shiloh Road or Natchez Trace Tower. I think we've called it by both names.
Okay, the Shiloh Road Tower, and it's, will you read the number for the record off as to what the number here is?
So the tower number is 1096, and the sector numbers are 10961, 10962, and 10963.
Okay, and right here, what color is the Sector 3 of this Shiloh Tower?
I believe you're actually pointing to Sector 1, right?
Okay, is that Sector 1?
Yeah, Sector
Okay,
1,
sorry.
Sector 2, Sector 3.
So Sector 1, what color is that Sector 1?
Well, there's lots of blue on there, so I'll call it blue, but it's a medium dark blue.
Okay, and what is this green color right here that bleeds into it?
It's an olive green, I guess.
Okay, I mean, I meant what sector number is that?
Oh, that sector number is 31523.
And is that what we were calling Cox 3?
Correct. Cox Road, southwest sector.
Okay. And so this Shiloh Tower sector, that's a fairly weak sector as you compare it to other sectors. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there are other sectors on here that you can see. Even the south sector here reaches out much further than that one does. You can do the kind of the similar analysis even on like the Parsons sector, just as far as how much area it covers.
Okay. And you at some point actually were overlaid this map with a road map, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And that Yellow Springs Road where Shane's, Austin's house is, and Yellow Springs Church is, and where his grandmother's barn is, those all showed up in Cox 2 sector clearly, didn't they?
That's correct.
They were not in that small Shiloh Road sector?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, I want to ask you about a spoof card. If somebody had a card that they could call up, well, first of all, you're familiar with people being able to spoof other people's telephone numbers on caller ID, aren't you?
Yes, I know that it's possible. Sorry, yes, I know it's possible. I'm not going to claim I know everything about the availability or how to get them, but I know that it is possible, yes.
But even if you were to try to send out a different caller ID number, these call records that you review would still show that a call was made from that particular device.
That's correct.
Because in fact, as we look at the call records, let me see. I'll just pick up one of the last little exhibits I just put in. This is the subscriber information right here. This column, it's called IMSI.
That's correct.
That's the subscriber
This
information.
is subscriber information.
So it records what telephone number is in the SIM card itself for an AT&T phone. The identifying number.
Correct.
Identification for that AT&T phone.
Correct. It is the subscriber identity. Rather than trying to link a number to a subscriber, this is the actual identity for the subscriber. Nobody knows what their IMSI is. They just know what their phone number is. The IMSI is how the networks actually manage that internally.
Okay, so that's not something that a spoof card would be able to change. This is what it is, regardless.
That's correct. As far as any knowledge that I have, I've never seen a way to spoof the IMSI.
Okay, so any call made with this subscriber information, and then this other column, and it's the IMEI, that's the equipment identifier.
That's correct.
That also doesn't change even if you're using some kind of dial-in spoof calling card information.
No, the IMEI is specific to the device that you're using. Some of you may be familiar with it, but you can actually have a SIM card in your phone, and you can take that little chip out and put it in another phone. So the IMEI will follow the actual handset itself, whereas the chip that you pulled out would have the IMSI information on it. So the IMEI, the equipment identifier, is unique to each handset, whereas the IMSI is the information on that chip, the brain of it, if you will.
And based on Zach Adams' phone, his IMEI, you actually were able to cross-reference that with what kind of handset he was using on that particular day, weren't you?
Correct.
And it was a flip phone handset.
That's correct.
It wasn't a smartphone.
No.
Um, So, as far as Shane Austin, let me pull the record back. I can see, where did his report go? Page 12. Okay, so Shane Austin's telephone, I'm looking at page 13 of your report. You can go ahead and,
Would you like me to plug that back in again?
what?
Would you like me to plug that back in again?
Flip it upside down. I've gotten it. This one is upside down, that one's right side up. You have to, there. So if you go back to page 13, where we're looking at Shane Austin's records, that's it, right there. Okay, so Shane Austin's telephone is on the Cox 3 tower at 9:23 a.m.
That's correct.
Okay. Holly Bobo's cell phone is down on the Parsons tower at 9:25 a.m.
That's correct.
So 2 minutes later, she's down on the Parsons tower.
That's correct.
And then 20 minutes later, Shane Austin is is on the, on his home tower still, the Cox Road home tower, Cox 3.
Yes, at 9:45 a.m., he's on cell 31523.
Okay. And going back to the information about Zach Adams and Jason Autry being over by the Birdsong Road exit off of Interstate 40. And that's page 16. Yes, oh, you're there. Had they gone down, do you see, it's kind of hard on your map, but right below where you have the number 39078 in that sector, the Birdsong 8 sector, right there. There's that little jig of water that sticks out from the Tennessee River, which is kind of hard to see on the...
You're talking about this area over here?
Yes, I'm talking about that kind of slough, little area of water. So if somebody were driving along the edge of the Tennessee River and then across the top northern section of that slough of water, and they were on the telephone, they would have to be in that 39078 sector. If they're on the telephone while they're driving along there, they would have to be in that sector.
That is the sector that serves that area, correct?
Okay. The prosecutor was asking you a lot of questions about the phone, could possibly be in somebody's pocket. All the times the phone is silent, such as at 7:45 that morning, 7:40 that morning, it's just as likely that phone could be on the nightstand next to somebody's bed that's sleeping.
That's correct.
If the phone's not speaking, then there's no information to be gained from that. You don't know.
That's correct.
Okay. And the portion of time, going back to Zach Adams, which I think is probably page 10. If you go back to his page 10, is he that page? No, that's Jason Autry, so he must be page 7. So we look at Zachary Adams' records on page 7 that morning. At 8:38, he's on his home sector, which is the Cox 2 sector. Is that right? Can you point to that record up there at 8:38? Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. And then at 8:53, he's on Cox 2 sector. But it is possible that he didn't even leave his home that morning. He could still be at his home.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm clear on something. You said at 8:53, he's on the Cox...
2.
Well,
Cox 3, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So at 8:53 a.m., he has a voice call out to Jason Autry, and it is on the 3rd sector of Cox Road, the southwest sector of Cox Road, 31523.
But it's just as possible that he could still be on his... He could still be at his home at that point.
It's a possibility.
Okay. And then at 8:58 or 8:59, he's on his home sector, Cox 2.
You said 8:59?
Yes.
That's correct.
And at 9:10, he's still on his home sector, Cox 2.
That's correct.
And at 9:12, he's still on his home sector, Cox 2.
That's correct.
No further questions.
Where's the cross?
That's actually,
Here, let me get back to, I think there's a typo that you might have here. It's on page 12.
and that's actually, I was doing bad math before. Now I see what my problem is. 8:38, we're on the orange, correct?
Correct. You're on cell 31522.
But we're not back to the orange until 20 minutes later, right?
Correct.
So there's 20 minutes in which the phone is in the yellow.
There's 20 minutes between the two call records that place him onto that Cox
Exactly.
Road southeast sector.
And I think as you just answered, is it possible that he's in the yellow but he's actually at his house? I think your answer said it was possible, right?
It's possible. It's not the most likely scenario, but it is
Possible.
certainly possible.
And equally possible if he was showing in the orange that he was actually in the yellow. Just the reverse of what we just said.
Well, if you say in the yellow, that's not very specific. If the question is,
I
was
got
he
you.
over at Shane Austin's residence and it showed up in orange, that's not likely.
Right.
It's not likely at all. Just
Not
because you're
likely
so...
or not possible.
Anything's possible. It's very, very unlikely.
And you mentioned something earlier, a good way to get real world data or to see what's actually happening in the real world, right?
Right.
Would be to drive test stuff.
Correct.
Well, you were asked about the Birdsong River and this route. This is a very hilly, very mountainous, very rural area, right?
Correct.
Well, did you drive test that?
Well, number one, drive testing it today with whatever the network is today wouldn't be indicative of what it was back in 2011. Certainly in the last 6 years, AT&T could have, and most likely did, modify their cell sites. The drive test data that we were looking at earlier was actually done by AT&T back in that time frame. It was my understanding they drove the areas that they were specifically concerned with, which did not include the area out by Birdsong.
Exactly. So this wasn't drive tested in 2011, is that correct?
That's correct.
And isn't it true that that limits your confidence with regard to whether or not a route passing through, what color is that? Green? Olive green?
Teal?
Does that limit your confidence when we're talking about 2011, an undrive tested route through a hilly mountainous area, in your answer about the route?
It doesn't limit my confidence because what we're looking at here is still the predictions for the between the sectors. So we know that there's no other service that would cover through that area.
Predictions.
Predictions, that's correct.
But the drive test you described to us in your own testimony as getting information from the real world.
That's correct.
That's it. Oh, wait 1 second. I just want to correct a typo. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Did I miss one?
There it
Or
is.
2 or 10?
Page 12. I think I asked you to write that page number down.
Yes.
I just approached with the exhibit judge. This should try to trick anybody or anything like that.
Well, back into the also as part of 823. That should be 923, or are you talking about different device?
923.
Okay.
I'm going to, with your Honor's permission, there's just, all this is a typo. It's not intentional or anything like that. At the top of page 12, this exhibit, I'd like the witness just to change a time to what's actually correct.
Okay. Yes, I incorrectly wrote 8:23 a.m. instead of 9:23 a.m.
And when you were just talking about the route that wasn't drive tested back in 2011,
Yes.
you said something about a predictive map. Is that right?
The predicted best server map? Yeah, that was the map that we were just looking at on the screen.
Was that a map from April 2011?
I don't know if it was prepared in April, but I know it was prepared in conjunction with their analysis.
There's something about that isn't in the exhibit. If I could have that exhibit, Ms. Clerk, I just want to look at one thing. The overlay map that crazy network. I'm looking at Exhibit 219. This is that predictive map,
Correct.
and it's crazy to look at, but I'm looking at it. I don't see the river on it, and I don't see that tower on it.
That's correct. It's not on that map.
Okay. That's all my questions, sir.
All right.
Mr. Reeves, you build cellular telephone networks based on your physics prediction about coverage areas, don't you?
I do.
So when you call it a predictive map, it's accurate enough that you build entire networks based on those calculations, don't you?
That's correct.
Okay. And I know that the government's attorney has asked you a lot of questions here today. Is there anything about any of these questions that would make you change your original conclusion that Zachary Adams' device and Holly Bobo's devices were not together or not moving together on the morning of April the 13th?
No, my opinion remains the same.
Okay. No further questions.
That's all right. You can step down, you're free to go.
Thank you.
You want to call your next?
Yes, we'd like to call Mr. Garnett.
Is this the one we said should be very brief?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
You want to take that home with you, is that what you're saying?
Raise your right hand, please. Solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. Be seated, state your first and last name, spell them for the benefit of the court reporter.
James Garnett, JamesGarnett.
Judge, we've agreed, stipulated something amongst ourselves, if you'll just give us a minute. We're gonna redact something, and then before it is published to the jury, we'll substitute it.
Okay.
And how were you employed in April and the spring of, in January, February of 2012?
I was a special agent with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
Okay, and
That's
you remain with that department, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and
If it helps, I will stipulate to his credentials, his computer search of the computer of interest.
Okay.
No objections.
Mr. Garnett, you did an analysis on Terry Britt's computer in the winter of 2012, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you were able to determine some search terms that Mr. Britt had been using?
I was, yes.
Okay. And I will come up here and I'd like to pass this document to you first. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, ma'am.
And is this kind of a brief report of some of the search terms that you found on Mr. Britt's computer?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to put this into evidence, but we're going to swap out one without a Sharpie on it
Okay. The
as an exhibit.
exhibit 248.
Okay. I'm going to put this up here. So, I've got it marked up, and plus, this under my Sharpie. So, can you explain to the jury, please, and I'll see if I can do a little zoom here. Can you explain to the jury how we know what search terms are being used here? So such in this top line, What search terms are we seeing that Mr. Britt has used on his computer?
That would be a web history for the website xnxx.com. In the search bar at the top of that website, he would have typed abducted.
Okay, and what's the next line show us?
Web history again for nudevista.com. In the search box at the top of that, the user typed rape and scene. The
Now, he didn't type the plus, he just typed those two separate words, is that right?
No, ma'am. The plus is put there by the code, the computer.
Okay, and then what's the next search that he did?
Another search on the same website, nudevista.com.
Can we get the dates for all of these, please?
Sure.
Would you
Can
like
you
me
read
to?
the date along with it then?
Yes, this first one is a little bit confusing. For going back to the xnxx.com and the abducted line at the very top, the program, the tool that I used, switched the day and the month in that line, so it's still in January, but it is January 8th of 2011 is when that search was conducted.
Okay.
The next one, the rape scene, that one was conducted on January 6th of 2012.
Okay.
The next one, the Nude Vista, and the search term was rape and anal. That one was conducted on January 12th of 2012.
Okay.
The next line was conducted again on January 12th of 2012 at 8:27 a.m. and that was nudevista.com again, and anal rape was the term typed into the box.
Okay.
All three of these next ones are actually the same search term. It would have been typed by the user one time, but these are referring to on the results when they're presented in a gallery form on the web page. There'll be more than one page. So if they click next, for instance, if they're presented with 20 various images or videos on that page, they click next to get the next 20 images or videos on the next page. So when you see ones like the three, they're all three done the same results, just different start. It says start equals 144, start equals 96, start equals 48. That's just another page. The user has essentially clicked next and gotten a new page of results. Same search term, same instance where they typed it in the box, just another page of results. So on these, it was nudevista.com and the user typed anal rape into the search box. That was conducted on January 12th of 2012 at 8:27 a.m. And the different dates on 8:26 versus 8:27 is just, again, hitting that next. That was the time the next page actually loaded.
Okay.
The next one, nudevista.com, anal rape, conducted on 1/12/2012 at 8:26. That one is the initial one. So that's where the user typed that the first time, and that's the first search for it that led to the previous three above it. Underneath that, we have conducted on January 12th of 2012 at 8:18 a.m. nudevista.com, abducted. That was just a plain term, abducted, right there. Below that, we have January 12th of 2012 at 8:18 again. That was the initial search, nudevista.com, abducted. Below that, we have January 12th of 2012, 8:18. Nudevista.com, the term typed in was kidnapped. Below that, January 12th, 2012 at 8:18 a.m. Again, nudevista.com, the term was kidnapped. kidnapped and raped.
And he actually typed the "and" there.
That one, yes, ma'am. He actually typed the "and." Below that, January 12th of 2012 at 8:17 a.m., nudevista.com, the term at the top was kidnapped. And the last one, January 12th of 2012 at 8:17 a.m., the site was nudevista.com, the term was kidnapped.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross.
Very briefly, if I'm correct, you were asked to do an analysis on this computer using, I guess, a history associated with like S&M type things, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And for what period of time did you look at this computer for?
The entire history of the computer. I didn't limit this to any particular period.
All right, and so the search warrant was conducted on January the 17th, 2012,
Yes, ma'am.
and you looked at the entire history of the computer.
Prior to it being seized.
And then in the end, it's been taken down now, but I'm assuming it's still exhibit. In the end, there was a search done on January the 8th of 2011, January the 6th, 2012, and then the remainder were all one, I don't know what to call it, one period of time between 8:17 in the morning and 8:59 where he browsed, or whoever was using that computer, a number of different sites.
Yes, ma'am. That was all one grouping at the
All
end.
right, thank you. I don't have anything else.
Done? Done with this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you can be excused.
Thank you.
That's the end of our proof, Your Honor. Next rest.
Let's take a recess, about 15 minutes. All right, Mr. Adams, have your attorneys advised that I wanted to discuss with you your decision whether or not to give testimony? All right, stand up, raise your right hand. Solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
By virtue of the Constitution, we all have certain rights. One of those rights is you can't be compelled to give testimony. You were present when I read that to the jury at the outset. Said if you do not take the stand to testify, that they can draw nothing from that, that's a constitutional right. Also, you have a constitutional right to give testimony if you you can take the stand. If you do, you'd be subjected to cross-examination, and your credibility would be judged by the jury by the same standards I've already charged them. This is your decision, okay? You can make it having consulted with your attorneys. I would expect you to consult with your attorneys, but this is not their decision, this is your decision. You're standing there between two of your attorneys. Mr. Gonzalez came on the case late, but you've had ample opportunity to discuss it with Mr. Simmons and Ms. Thompson. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Having said all of that, is it your election not to give testimony?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Are you doing this freely and voluntarily?
Yes, sir.
You don't feel you've been pressured either way,
No,
to
sir.
give or not to give?
No, sir.
This is your decision.
Yes, sir.
All right. Want to address anything further?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right. You can be seated. There's no reason the attorneys have to feel that Mr. Adams can't make an informed decision, like no type of mental illness or disease or anything that has arisen during the course of this entire time that you feel like would make him unable to make that decision.
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right, the other thing, you want to renew your motion
Your Honor, this time, Mr. Adams would renew his motion for judgment of acquittal pursuant to Tennessee Rules Procedure 29, which simply indicate that the state has failed to carry their burden of proof as to all counts.
All right, thank you. We went into more detail at the conclusion of the state's proof concerning corroboration of an accomplice and some other things, but those factors still apply, and the court feels it's a jury question. Okay? I don't think they've renewed those. Earlier, there were pretrial motions to dismiss certain counts. By this court's actions, obviously, I'm not dismissing any counts. You understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. The state has indicated that they do wish to present rebuttal, so let's get our jury in. And I told counsel that a trial is a search for truth, and rebuttal testimony should be confined to rebuttal. It's not just an attempt to see who can hit it the ball last. I think that's the analogy I gave earlier, but I expect you to confine your proof to rebuttal or serve rebuttal as it might be. All right? All right, be seated. State earlier rested their case in chief. The defense has now rested. So at this time, I told the parties if there's any rebuttal proof, you'll be confined to rebuttal, but you may call your first rebuttal witness on behalf of the state.
Before we start the short rebuttal, Your Honor, we announced earlier in the trial with the defense, there's going to be a stipulation with regard to some phone records and a list of numbers associated with people. We just both neglected to do this at the end of the proof. So I have this marked as the next number exhibit, Your Honor.
B-249.
Dana Bobo.
He's been put under oath. I'm going to put him, it's been a while, I'm going to go ahead and place him back under oath. Raise your right hand. Solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do.
Mr. Bobo, I'm not going to ask you, but a couple of questions. In particular, do you recall 2 or 3 days after Holly was abducted on April the 13th of 2011, so that Friday or that Saturday, do you recall going to several different locations with your cousin who's in the courtroom, Sheriff's Department?
Yeah.
Was one of those locations the trailer, property surrounding the trailer that belonged to Shane Austin?
Yes.
Do you recall, and can you tell the jury whether or not you noticed a burn barrel?
Yes, there was a burn barrel.
Did you walk around the property?
Yes, I did.
What else did you notice?
There was I couldn't tell you what, it's a black truck sitting behind the trailer. I didn't know if the Chevrolet Ford what it was, black truck sitting behind the trailer.
Right, now you were in the courtroom earlier when your wife Karen testified. I'm not asking you this, and this was a different occasion to go to his trailer than the time that you went and actually spoke to him. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
On the day that you and your cousin Anthony went there, did you speak to anyone there at the trailer that day?
Not that day, no ma'am.
And do you remember whether it was Friday the 15th or Saturday the 16th?
It was one of the two, and I'm pretty sure it was Friday the 15th, 2 days after she abducted.
Is there any doubt in your mind that there was a burn barrel?
No, there's no doubt in my mind.
Tell the jury where it was.
It was on the right-hand side of the trailer.
front or back?
It was kind of toward the front.
Thank you. Nothing else, Your Honor?
Cross.
No questions,
All
Your
right,
Honor.
step down. Next.
Jack Van Hooser.
Raise your right hand, please. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir, I do.
Be seated, state first and last name and spell, please.
Jack Van Hooser, Jackvanhooser.
Mr. Van Hooser, can you tell me if you're currently employed?
I am.
All right, where do you work?
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
And prior to your current position, did you work for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation?
I did, yes, ma'am.
For how long?
A little over 30 years.
Okay, and did you retire from that organization?
Yes, ma'am.
In what year?
Late June, early July 2015.
Prior to your retirement from TBI, the summer of 2015, what office were you assigned to and what was your position within the office?
Immediately prior, I was the special agent in charge of the West Tennessee Criminal Investigation Division.
And so they would call you the SAC, right?
That's right.
All right, as the SAC, did you supervise a person by the name of Terry Dykes?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you supervise a person by the name of Brent Booth,
Yes, ma'am.
Joe Walker?
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody assigned to one of the two different offices in West Tennessee?
Yes, ma'am. That's
Both
correct.
Memphis and Jackson.
Correct.
Tell me when you got that position.
That would have been August, September of 2012.
So when you came to that office, the investigation of Holly Bobo was well underway?
Yes, ma'am.
Had you previously been involved in that investigation?
I was the regional crime lab supervisor. Prior to that, I know evidence came and went from the crime lab. As far as my personal involvement in the investigation, no, ma'am, I did not.
Okay. So when you became the SAC of that office, would you agree with me that you were sort of a fresh set of eyes on the investigation?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And did there come a time pretty soon after you took over the position of SAC that you felt a change needed to be made?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What change was it?
The case agent on the case needed to be benched. He needed to be put on an administrative duty as opposed to following leads. So
Who was the case agent?
Terry Dykes.
Okay, and what did that mean as the case agent?
The case agent leads the investigation. He should have the big picture view of the investigation, and he should be leading things from that objective position.
In the 30 years that you were a special agent with TBI, had you ever made that sort of decision before?
No, ma'am.
And why was he benched?
In my opinion, based on statements he made as well as statements other agents made to me, he had lost his objectivity. He had tunnel vision on a particular suspect and was not objective about all of the facts coming into the case.
And who did you select to take over as lead or case agent for the Holly Bobo investigation?
Special Agent Joe Walker.
Okay, and to your knowledge, did Joe Walker remain in that position as case agent until the conclusion of the case, or I guess until you retired?
To my knowledge, yes, ma'am. Certainly till I retired, to my knowledge, till today.
I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Now, when exactly did you say you took over the case, or you came?
I'm sorry.
When is it that you came in to your leadership role?
August, September of 2012.
Okay. And at that very time, that's the time that the TBI had determined they were going to focus on Clint Bobo, isn't it?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to being outside the scope.
She can ask.
I don't recall it being exactly at that time, no ma'am.
Okay, it's at that time that you gave Clint Bobo, you brought him in for some additional questioning, didn't you?
He was brought in sometime after that for additional questioning.
And as a matter of fact, there was a letter that was written about to the Bobo family about how many times Clint Bobo had lied, wasn't there?
I recall the letter. I don't recall any details. I didn't write the letter.
But you recall that it outlined all the times that the TBI thought that Clint Bobo had lied or changed his story.
His story had changed over time, yes ma'am.
And also, you all were, at the time, the TBI was very focused on the fact that they thought that Clint Bobo was somehow involved in his sister's abduction.
We're kind of getting outside the area of rebuttal.
But,
Which is why I objected.
Your Honor.
Actually, if we're going to go outside, I have a whole lot more questions that I would have asked. I tried to keep it narrow. And
It's not
focused.
narrow. They're saying that they've taken Terry Dykes off because he had tunnel vision. I say that the TBI at that time had tunnel vision in another inappropriate area, and that was the Bobo family.
You're outside the area of rebuttal.
Okay, no further questions.
Done? All right, step down, you're free to go.
Thank you, sir.
And we don't have any further proof, Your Honor.
You serve rebuttal?
No, Your Honor.
All right. I kind of mapped out a schedule for you folks earlier. I think everyone's good with that. I think it's unfair if I were to continue to go today. We're going to let you folks out early. If we don't, I promise you it will be very late. We will bring you in as close to 8:30 as we can in the morning. We've got to get you fed and through the school zones and everything. The order that we will then proceed in is you will be handed additional materials for your notebooks that will go behind the next divider. Unfortunately, you don't have to set the whole thing. It's a lot of material. It's a very long charge. It will take me perhaps close to an hour to read that to you. We will then take a recess because I don't like to break up closing argument if I can keep from it. I'd rather there be some continuity and some flow. So we'll take a break after that charge that I read to you. Sometimes you've got that in front of you, but still it can be somewhat dry. It's very important, but it can be somewhat dry, and I can't read it like Richard Burton or somebody. That's the old days. I can't think of who it'd be now. I can't make it any more interesting, okay? I can't sing it. I can't do anything that's going to make it anything other than pretty tedious and dry, but it's very important. But you will have that material with you so that you can refer to it later. Once we've taken that recess, the attorneys will have an opportunity to speak to you in their closing statements. The state goes first because they have the burden of proof, followed by the defense counsel, and then the state can speak last in their rebuttal argument. At that time, I will mix these up. If you're all still healthy, everything's good, I'll draw 3 names, and then the remainder of you will then start your deliberations. You've heard the proof, so there's kind of a danger, but I'm telling you, don't form any opinion in this case. Wait until you go back with your fellow jurors to deliberate toward reaching an agreement in this case. So don't form or express any opinion. Don't talk with anyone, not even among yourselves. Don't allow anyone to discuss the case with you. Remain in the presence of the officers anytime you have outside conversations with family or anything else. Do you have any questions? If everything goes well, you should get this case. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. When the alternates are chosen, will they be just sent like back to they won't be released. Right?
They actually, once you start your deliberations, I can't substitute an alternate in. So yeah, the lady that says me, we're gonna keep the alternates. So don't get too happy.
What I'm saying is like, well, they, even though they really don't have no footing, and I guess they'll need to hear this information, right? In case something happens to one of the others, or will they be kept separate?
I'll have to deal with that. They'll be kept separate. Okay. In the event that there's a sentencing hearing, they might be put in at that time because it's kind of like a mini trial. But this is all way ahead. It's theoretical, so don't hold me to anything yet, but that's a pretty good question. All right, anything else? So everybody understands, as much as I'd like to go forward, I don't think it'd be fair to these people. Matter of fact, they're going to stay with me a few minutes to further discuss the details that will make tomorrow flow pretty good, okay? So you folks at this time can be started.